Welcome everybody, my name's Chris and this is your weekly wrap of what is making news in the renewable technologies market. On today's show, a mega solar farm begins construction in New South Wales, battery costs set to plummet in 2019, 40,000 homes can now access big subsidies, and I take a deep dive into why Victoria has rolling blackouts this week. For those new to the channel, welcome, and for returning subscribers, a big thank you once again for supporting me. This weekly news wrap-up is about renewable technologies, such as solar, wind, wave, battery storage, and the world of EVs, and here I offer an Australian perspective on these developments, and of course what's going on here and around the world. Obviously I'll give you a little bit of a healthy dose of analysis and insight. So kicking off today's episode is some amazing news from New South Wales, where Australia's largest solar farm is about to begin construction. The 900 megawatt $1 billion project developed by the Australian firm Reach Solar Energy will be built in the Riverina district, southwest New South Wales. This potential of power like 1 million homes, and it's a massive solar generator, will take more than 4 years to build, and it will support 450 jobs during its construction. To put this in context, a typical coal power plant produces about 600 megawatts, but let's move on from fossil fuels, and how about this? New South Wales currently has like 500 megawatts of large-scale solar, so with those 9 plants already producing this much energy, this one's going to dwarf them. Next, Energy Matters reported that solar battery costs are set to plummet in 2019. According to S&P Global, commercial solar battery costs fell by 40% from 2017-18, and it's now like $59 per megawatt hour. During the same period, the amount of energy storage has doubled to 9 gigawatts. Noted mainly in the electric vehicle market, the battery storage, they predict, will have a further growth of 80%. And our third story is going to fit nicely with our last one, so listen carefully, peeps. So South Australia has announced that it's ready to become like a world leader in solar battery installations with a $100 million subsidy program. They promised it last year at their state election, whereby 40,000 homes can access up to $6,000 per home in subsidies to reduce the total package of battery. The scheme has like $2 amounts, so you've got a concession card, you'll get $600 per kilowatt, and if you don't, and for everyone else, it's $500 per kilowatt. Alright, so to put that into context, if you put in a 5 kilowatt pack, you could receive a $2,500 subsidy, or $3,000 for concession holders, while the subsidy will vary depending on the size of your battery. So it's capped it for everyone at a maximum of $6,000 per battery. And so for those who might be considering the Tesla Powerwall 2 at 14 kilowatts, you will get between $6,000, well, you will get $6,000 off the total package. So in Australia, the Tesla Powerwalls cost $11,000, sans no installation costs. So that's actually really compelling, and my advice, don't wait. The scheme appears to be capped at $100 million. And there's also an additional $100 million available through financing from Clean Energy Finance Corporation. So by my bad math, the pot of money won't reach 40,000 homes if they all get Tesla Powerwalls. Only it'd extend to maybe 16 to 20,000 homes, but that's still a great start, and I'm pretty sure will be the highest number of Powerwalls in one location anywhere in the world. So good job, South Australia. If you lived in Southeast Australia this week, you experienced 2 record days of temperature of 44 degrees straight. And due to the high demand and not enough supply, the Australian Energy Market Operator, or AEMO as I call them, had to implement load shedding. And that puts like rolling blackouts in place, and 60 to 100,000 homes were without power. So before going any further, for those who might not be familiar what load shedding is, let me give you a quick 101 on why it occurs and the significance. The Australian power grid is actually one of the world's largest connected grids. It's controlled by AEMO, and they have multiple roles in providing power ultimately to everyone in the country. Think of them as controllers, and they determine what you and I pay for in electricity, but one of the more important roles is to actually ensure that the power grid system is always balanced. So between like supply and demand. If there's no extra supply available, they have no choice but to actually reduce demand by shutting customers off. And they do this by load shedding, or more commonly known as rolling blackouts. And it affects multiple suburbs at a time, and these blackouts have occurred for many decades previously, like even before renewables, and simply as a result of this mismatch. But the reality to you and me is that your home, your shopping mall, your business, everything near you will be without electricity for 45 minutes to an hour, or if you're really unlucky, even longer. When we suffer through heat waves like 45 degrees, it's not safe, and people have actually died from heat stroke. Now, I imagine will be people like jumping onto the comments now and saying, but why do they have to do this? This isn't a good thing. And you're right, it isn't. However, the market operator needs to ensure that the entire grid for the whole country remains safe to operate and doesn't start actually taking out interconnecting states. But wait, you mentioned the grid thing. Well, yes, I did, Bobby, and points to you. So, if we're fortunate in this country to be connected, even like down to Tasmania, with interconnectors, and they allow one area to draw energy from another. However, when AEMO asks suppliers to actually provide more juice, if they can elect to do it, they one, if they've got capacity, they'll do it, and two, the price is right. And here's, folks, is where the first issue is. Due to our privately owned electric providers, our electricity rates are at the mercy of shareholders and private interests. During high demand, the market regulator can set wholesale prices of electricity as high as $14,000 per megawatt hour. Normally, wholesale price of megawatts is like just $91, so $14,000 is just absurd and not sustainable. Something like this, obviously, businesses don't like absorbing, and so what do? Yeah, you know it. They pass it on to you and me, and in Australia, we have the highest electricity prices in the world. So, with this in mind, today I'm concerned about reading that our politicians are calling our power grid not fit for purpose. Studying Lily D'Ambrosio, the Victorian Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, there's a huge generation failure from aging coal and gas generators, and that was to blame for our blackouts. Now, not to miss a beat, our federal Member of Parliament, Angus Taylor, agreed that our grid had let people down, but said that widespread blackouts emphasise the need for new, reliable sources of power generations. And for those that are not aware of Australian politics, let me note that Mr. Taylor is firmly stuck in fossil fuel interests and has reiterated that our reliable statement is actually code for coal power and other dirty generation sources. His boss, Prime Minister Scott Morrison, wait, let me just check that he still is. Is Scott Morrison still Prime Minister? He's the guy who once brought a piece of coal into Parliament and said, "This is coal."
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
The Treasurer knows the rule on crops.
It's coal.
And also said that if the opposition leader Bill Shorten becomes Prime Minister, all the lights will go out across the country. It's hilarious for all the wrong reasons. So, sidebar, Mr. Morrison, you're now in the hot seat and our power went out. Is that because of renewables, coal, or if you ask me, your lack of direction in the industry and letting us know which way we need to move forward with? This bit of tomfoolery was in response to the 2016 South Australian statewide blackout. And for those who believe these fools, were made to believe that South Australia got in a situation because of the high mix of renewables, whereas in actuality it was due to the infrastructure damage to extreme storms and weather events that no one can control for. If several vital parts of your network go down, then it doesn't matter if power comes from coal, you name the power source, doesn't matter. There'll be no power transmission. End of story, period, moving on. Recalling from several minutes ago how South Australia will be actually installing perhaps the world's largest microgrid with more than 40,000 homes getting solar and batteries, key point. The reality to them is that when the load shedding occurs, what happens to these homes? Their lights stay on, the aircon stays on, and vital life-saving equipment keeps running. And it will minimize or eliminate load shedding entirely by creating these microgrids that are capable of powering not only the homes but also the grid when need be. So, please, our politicians out there, Stop thinking circa 1970. Get with the times, listen to industry experts, the science of climate change, and invest in reliable power generation. You know the Tesla big battery that South Australia installed in 100 days, all was free? Well, that impressive bit of tech has actually reduced price surges of $14,000 to near low levels because it can respond as quickly as like milliseconds instead of like the 30 minutes to an hour that a typical peaker gas plant or coal plant actually requires. Moreover, due to this responsiveness, it's already $30 million in profit in 6 months of the year and saving the wholesale grid purchases of $33 million. So before I close on this article, and all the links of this are like down below and all the supporting evidence, there is a silver lining here. And Kerry from the Age newspaper states that yesterday 9,600 megawatts of power was required in Victoria. As coal-fired power stations reduced their output due to the heat, the proportion of renewable energy actually soared. He noted that the state was generating about 8,400 megawatts of power and that 37% came from renewable sources. Much of it from hydropower, but rooftop solar also met much of the demand with 9.5% and wind 5%. So, wrapping up, let's take a look at the comments from last week's episode. Well, that's embarrassing. There's none. So look, if you're feeling up to it, please consider putting a comment down below. Like to hear from you. And hey, look, if you haven't already, if you like this episode, please consider subscribing, give it a like, share it on your socials. And if you do nothing, be kind to the environment.